Hello everybody, welcome back to the Mondovi Line. This is my first video for 2025, so I thought I'd start and just give a complete overview of the layout and what it is and why it is. And I'll do a lot of shots from farther back so you can see how it fits into the room. So I started this layout about 2 years ago in a completely unfinished, empty, nasty basement. And this room has 3 walls now, insulated, ending there with a open wall in front here. Ceilings were painted white. The whole room was rewired, new electrical box added, LED lights added all the way around. Rubber floor added down here. So the first part of the layout was Mondovi, 16 feet long. We have the town of Eleva coming around here to the town of Strum, and I'll get more details as we go, to Osseo, coming around to staging. So here is a drawing I made of the layout. So basically the layout is 4 sections, 4 towns, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5th being staging, with 180-degree turns in between each of them, a peninsula and a turn here. So the Mondovi branch was a 36.4 mile terminating branch line. It started in Fairchild, Wisconsin, and moved through the 4 towns, got as far as Mondovi, and they ran out of money. And that's as far as it ever went. So this is the staging yard that's just in the other room. So let's start and go take a look at that. So one of the requirements for this layout is I had to have storage underneath all of it because the layout replaced areas for us to store things. So I try to do it as nicely as possible with shelves, and eventually there's going to be curtains down to the floor. The staging yard is approximately 12 feet long, and the whole layout is 24 inches wide anywhere you go on the layout along the walls. The peninsula is 36 inches and then split in half. So this represents Fairchild and Altoona. Fairchild is the connection from the branch line onto the main line, and Altoona was the yard that they were based out of at this time. My era is approximately 1959. And we have 6 tracks in here, and as you can see, a lot of rolling stock and boxes laying around. So it's not a working yard, it's more of a storage yard, but I do use the first track here for staging the train. The branch line always had 1 train at a time. They didn't have enough business to run multiple trains, although I know they did that occasionally. So when I stage a train, I usually use the outside track as the train coming in, and then I just end on the same track when I come back off the branch line. Coming out of staging, I have this 180-degree turn to come into the town of Osseo. My idea is right here is to be where scenery starts, and use some view block to go into Osseo. So coming out of staging, this highway overpass will be the scenic area where it starts. So I'll have trees and stuff on this side of it to block it, but the trains will come out of staging underneath the highway overpass, which represents Highway 10 in Wisconsin. And then we'll come around and We have Donald J's Speed Shop, named after my brother. And then we start with prototype businesses. Osseo Canning Company. There was a potato warehouse and a stockyard. As you come into Osseo, there were multiple oil dealers. I have room for Standard Oil. I didn't have room for the other couple that they had in there. The largest business in Osseo was United Milk Products. They were a condensery. So they get boxcars in of cans and labels and boxes, and boxcars out of cases of condensed milk. Osseo Canning Company was known for their sugar peas. So we load up boxcars with cases going out of peas, but the same as the United Milk Products, boxcars come in with tin cans and cases and labeling. Co-op had a grain elevator. We have the depot in Osseo. This is the second depot that was built in, I believe, the teens. So it was in place in the 50s. We have the Reed Murdoch Pickle Salting Station and the Owen Nelson Lumberyard, O&N Lumberyard, along this side of the tracks. And then we added a little diner here, which isn't necessarily prototypical of anything that was in Osseo, but there was definitely diners. So the train would come in from staging, and when they came into Osseo, they would pull the empties from the industries and put them on the team track runaround, or the runaround track here. Let me get that glare out of the way. There's a runaround track here. So they would place the empties there and then spot the inbound cars. The trains were blocked in such a way that the front cars in the train were the first to be spotted. So the Osseo cars would be on the front of the train. They would leave the empties here and come get them on the way back. And that's the same for each town along the way. The empties got pulled, left on a runaround track, and then on the way back off the branch line, they were added back to the train. So when they were done with Osseo, then I have a curve here coming back in. Now, the branch line was straight because of space, and as everyone else knows on their layouts, you condense and you multiply and subtract and move things around. And in my case, because of the space, this was the way I came up with to get all 4 towns in the branch line. If I had 100 feet of straight wall, it would be a straight branch line. Okay, so coming out of Osseo, I'm just starting to scenic this 180-degree curve here, and it's going to be a farm scene. I just finished building this farmhouse, which was a AMB laser kit, now Berkshire Valley models, and I made some pine trees to put behind there, and the train's going to come around. It's a farm here, and I'm going to have a barn that I'm building. Haven't started that yet. Another AMB kit. So then we're going to come around this curve and into the town of Strum. Now, one of the things that I would have rather done is have negative space between towns. I had to make the choice of either cutting out some of the towns on the branch line or doing this. So because I don't want a train to be in one town with the caboose here and the locomotive in the other town, I'm going to have some sort of view blocks. Maybe we'll have some trees here in the barn. Yeah, that's what we did. So when I did the layout, Mondovi was first to be built, 16 feet long. Then I built this back section here, which was temporary staging. Then I built Osseo, which is about 14 feet long. so I could operate Osseo and Mondovi, and I did that for quite a while. Then I added staging and was operating the layout as Osseo. Across here you have about 10 feet, and then into Mondovi. The last thing I built was this peninsula here. So this is about 36 inches wide across the peninsula. It's about 12 feet out, maybe a little closer to 14. And then this section on the outside here, it's about 54 inches across, so I could get a curve around here that a 50-foot boxcar could actually navigate. So these are the last sections that I built. Strum on one side, Eleva on the other, and they're not scenic yet. So after we come around this curve, we come into the town of Strum. So let's go take a look at that. Okay, here's the town of Strum. When you come in, the first thing out here is the Strum elevator, a large mill. There wasn't very many pictures of what was actually here. There was a old-time mill elevator. This is scratch built based on the same mill that was in Wales, Wisconsin. And it's from a 1954, I believe, model railroad article by Russ Larson. And the Campbell scale models Montgomery feed mill was based on that article as well. I used his drawings and scratch built this. So we have a feed supply here with a nice long track. We can get 4 cars on here. So when you come into the town of Strum, there were 3 elevators. So I built all 3 based a little bit on photos that they had. There's not many photos again. They're more in a distance. So we have 3 different kits that I used to build an elevator. The depot here is a HRM kit. They make fantastic depot kits. Every town on the branch line had a pickle station, so we built another pickle station for here. And pickle station is going to get box cars of salt coming in and pickle cars going out. The cucumbers were brought to the pickle station by local farmers in their trucks and then brined in these barrels and sent out usually to Chicago. And then O&N Lumberyard was in all the towns, all 4 of the towns. They had their lumberyard. So this is a A&B transfer building that's now a lumberyard. And so here we're going to have a stockyard, and there were 3 oil dealers, Sinclair, Standard, and City Service, that are going to be back here. So that is Strum. So we come to the end of Strum, and we'll come to another curve. So when you come out of Strum, this 180-degree turn here, this is going to be a scenic focal point. So when you come down my basement stairs, this will be the first thing you see. And there's going to be the view block in the center, will extend out to about here. This will be the Buffalo or Beef River. It's called the Buffalo River, but it was nicknamed the Beef River. So we'll have the Beef River come in with 2 trestles, one here and one there. There'll be hills here, and there'll be a lot of trees. And this will give us a view block, so when you're looking straight in, you won't look down to towns. You'll see this, and it'll kind of make this seem farther away, hopefully. So here's the staircase, and come down, and the first thing you see, hopefully, is the peninsula. Like I said, this curve will come around the peninsula here. The river will come in here, across back here, and again with a trestle bridge here, and a trestle bridge here. Now, when I mentioned that I have storage underneath the layout all around, at the end of the peninsula, I built in my workbench. So my workbench is on wheels and rolls under here, and I have electricity and I have lighting, and I can sit here and do all my work. For example, Here's the barn I'm going to be building. So then you can see where the view block ends here. This will be all hill and trees all the way across where I'm now just got stuff in storage. So after the train finishes Osseo and Strum, it comes along here. It'll still have cars for Eleva and Mondovi. Come around the bend and we enter into the town of Eleva. Now Eleva has the least amount of industry. It's only got 2 tracks. So you got the main track coming in through town and you have a runaround track. And that was the entire trackage in Eleva. I added, because of space, I added a spur at the end so I could get all the industry in that prototypically was there. So the equity exchange is right here. I've recently found a photo that I think is of the equity exchange. So right now, you know, I have mock-ups, just stand-ins, so I can still do operations in Eleva even though I don't have any buildings. So, you know, there's a Walter's Ice House and some foam and an old DPM building. So once I decide what that's going to look like, this will be the equity exchange. And the lumber yard was on the back here. So I'll figure out some kind of stand-in for the lumber yard for loading in, loading out. This depot is just a stand-in. I'll be building this HRM kit. That'll go here. And there was a small barn between the lumber yard and the stock yards. So we'll build the stock yard to go here. And then there was another pickle salting station that went here. So that's why I have the longer siding. So one of the things that I discovered in my reading and my research is that the co-op stockyards in each town were all serviced on Tuesdays. So for operations on Tuesdays, they came in with a stockyard train. So just stock cars. That was the only day they brought the cars in, and they drop them off on their way in, get all the way to Mondovi. They would load it up, and they would either pull them out the same day or the next day, and take them back to the yards in, I don't know if they went all the way back to Altoona or if they dropped them in the yard in Fairchild. So then when we get done with Eleva, we have another 180-degree turn. So coming out of Eleva, we have a 180-degree turn into Mondovi. And like I said earlier, this 16-foot by 2 feet section in Mondovi, that was my layout. So initially, I built and scenicked that complete 1 square foot at a time and was able to operate Mondovi just as a standalone layout. And I did that for a while until I expanded. The problem I found was that I had no staging, so I had nowhere for the trains to come from or go to, and my operation started with the train already at the depot. So that's when I started expanding the layout so I could operate more prototypically and more enjoyably. So let's go back and take a look at this curve into Mondovi. So if you've ever been to Wisconsin, there are resorts and motels and places to stay for tourists all over the place. So I've decided that this curve here, there's a road that is going to come across here with the highway along the edge in Eleva. Grandview Lodge was our hotel resort that my parents owned in northern Wisconsin. So I am going to honor them by building their resort and putting it on my layout here. So there'll be a 8-unit hotel here and an office building here. And I'm going to build a pond right here. And there's going to be a little pier. And that's where my mom sat every day on the pier in the summer times fishing. So this is going to be their area. I'm going to have the pond and a dock and her fishing. Parking lot here. And then we'll come around the curve and enter the town of Mondovi. All right, the last section is Mondovi. So there's 4 tracks in Mondovi. We had to make some concessions. From right here, there used to be a spur that would have come out right in the middle of the aisle, and there was a stockyard and a co-op on it, or a fertilizer co-op. Then there was another angle that came out here where the original turntable and engine house were. Obviously, I can't fit that in 2 feet section, 24-inch sections, and I need an aisle. So we moved the stockyard onto the runaround track. Did not model the fertilizer co-op. And the engine house got moved to the end of the spur here. And even though the engine house was long gone by the diesel era, I had one built laying around from an old layout and I wanted to use it. So we're going to walk through here and take a look at the industries in Mondovi. So here we are in Mondovi. We have DCC here. I use Digitrax because that's what I bought 20 years ago and it still works. All right, coming into Mondovi off the curve here, crossing Highway 10, the Beef River Norwegian Lutheran Church is right there. There was a Beef River Lutheran Church. It wasn't so close to the tracks. It was in town, but it's now here. So you come in and the spurs start here. We have the main track, the runaround track, and the industry spur, which breaks in 2 down here into the house track, team track, if you will, and the elevator track. So past the church, we have the Reed Murdoch Pickle Salting Station. And the pickle station, again, boxcars of salt come in and pickle cars go out. The cucumbers get brined, turned into pickles of different grades, and we can fit 2 pickle cars here. This was a larger station. The Fund Brothers, that's with a PF, the Fund Brothers sawmill. The whole large area around behind the pickle station and around the whole end of the town here, or the yard, was a sawmill, and farmers and other people brought in logs that were cut into railroad ties, and the untreated railroad ties were shipped out in gondolas to be creosoted. I believe they sent them up north to the area around the UP or around Superior, Duluth, but many different railroads bought the ties from here and then would bring in their gondola and they'd ship them out. So I have a sawmill here, and then the spur that would have been right where I'm standing now is I moved the stockyard a little closer. So we use the runaround track here to spot 2 cars for that. This little shed here, the New Heisel Lime Works just outside of town would ship bags of lime and concrete to a loading dock here, which would then be sent out on the rails. So we put that prototypical, it was right next to the pickle station. So we put that in there. Mondovi had a water tower, but it wasn't near here, but it is now. Okay, so then there was the Sinclair oil dealer along the tracks here. And we got coal sheds and oil, so we have tank cars coming in and gondolas of coal coming in. Then there were 3 businesses on the back track. There was originally 4 elevators. One was a block across the alley here, so it would have been a block beyond the wall. And they had a tube like this with an auger that they would send to be loaded over here. So we had the Mondovi grain and feed, and they have material, feed, fertilizer, etc. coming in, grain coming in and out here. Then there was a roller mill, made flour. Cargill owned it, so I didn't have a good picture of it, and instead of figuring a scratch build, I used a couple of Foss scale model kits and built that, and that gets 2 boxcars at a time to load up with sacks of flour and go out. And then there's the Mondovi Co-op Equity back here, has an elevator and a feed store or a farm store. In front here, there was always storage. In the pictures that I've seen at Depot, there's always pictures in the foreground of railroad ties. So I think the Fun Brothers would lay out their ties along this spur and pick them up with gondolas. This is the team track. So every depot on the way had a team track with an unloading dock, and they would drop the LCL boxcar. LCL being less than carload. Think Amazon today. It was all on the rails back then. So every train had a LCL boxcar on the end of it with a caboose. So from what I figure, they would drop the LCL boxcar and the caboose at the team track by the depot and unload while they were doing the rest of the operations. So the train would come in to the depot here, and this is the second depot from Mondovi. The first one burned down, maybe the second one burned down too, but they finally built it in stone. So I scratch built this depot. Train would come in here and leave its cars on the main track, pull all the empties to the runaround track, and then start switching after the empties were pulled. This would be Washington Street that would run into town. The rail yards was kind of the end of town here. And Standard Oil was right here. So I put in a spur here that runs down to the Buffalo River at the end, which is where the branch line ended. And I use this spur for the Standard Oil. So we have their coal building here and their oil storage. This is bulk oil, like heating oil. And then they would come with trucks and load up and drive to the houses in the rural area that were heating on oil. Here we have the O&N Lumberyard again, the Owen and Nelson, O&N, and they would get lumber and 50-foot boxcars, building supplies. At the end of the branch line was the Mondovi Canning Company, and this was several buildings. I didn't have room for all of them, so I just built the main one. And this is a scratch built building based on postcards, photographs that I had, pictures in a book on the line that Arlen Colby wrote. There's the engine house that, instead of being in the middle of the aisle, I just put it at the end of a spur here. Okay, so this track here coming from the depot, beyond the depot, had a switch here, turnout, and went on an angle across the spur and down the block. I have a wall here, I couldn't do it. So the Land O'Lakes Creamery was actually a little farther back and with an angle track. So I just used this Walther's background kit. It's about 2 inches thick, to represent the Land O'Lakes Creamery. And there's spaces for 4 cars back on that track for operations. And speaking of operations, I use a switch list that's generated by a spreadsheet that I got from Matt Forkham in his MF Railroad. It's called Ops Buddy, and I modified it, and I have 4 pages, one for each town. And I go online, and all my cars are online in the spreadsheet, and you always know where they are, that you're either setting out or you're picking up. And I have codes for the car numbers that have, for example, Lake Superior and Ishpeming 2413 40-foot boxcar. Its code would be LSI 2413-40. And I have that in a list, and I roll a 20-sided die, not physical die, but a program that does it for me, a randomizer. And I have questions that say, when I come into Mondovi, am I going to do the O&N Lumberyard, yes or no, Canning Company, yes or no, etc. And then how many cars are going to be coming in, and am I pulling the cars out that are already there? So I can do a random switch list, set it up, have it all print out, and we can come downstairs then and run the operations. So we try to operate at a prototypical speed. My guess is by 1959, the branch line probably had a 10-mile-an-hour speed limit, if that much. They tended to derail quite a bit back towards the end. So I keep it fairly slow. So starting with the train and staging, and then coming around and pulling all the empties, putting them on the outside track, setting out all the Osseo inbound cars, then taking the blocks for the next 3 towns around, doing the same in Strum, putting the empties on the runaround track around the depot, and then putting out the setouts, then coming around, doing the same thing for Eleva, and then coming around to Mondovi and doing that. Now when I'm done there on the outside track, I have the outbound cars, so I have to grab the cars, grab the LCL boxcar, grab the caboose, head back, grab the outbound cars from Eleva, then grab the outbound cars from Strum, and then add on the outbound cars from Osseo, and pull those all back into the yard at Fairchild. In Fairchild, any cars that are heading to Railroad East, like Milwaukee or Chicago, would go on one line. Any cars that are going back to the yard in Altoona would go on another line. That being said, it's approximately, by myself, 2 hours to operate the entire layout, which is really nice because I can do one town at a time in a half hour to 45 minutes, let's say, and come back a couple days later and pick it up again and continue on, or I could do it all in at one time. So that's where I am. I hope that answered some of the questions that I've been getting and let you know where I'm at on this layout. What's up next is that far corner where the pine trees are. I'm going to finish that farm scene into Strum. I have to solder the rails from the diner around the corner and into Strum, and then I'm going to scenic from Strum down 1 foot at a time, just like I did with Mondovi, just like I did with Osseo. Start with one scene and scenic the scene, get it as close as I can to complete, and then move to the next scene or the next square foot. And so that should take me quite a little bit of time, maybe half the year or more to get to the end here. And then I'll probably go to the far corner and do the same and work my way down Eleva. So I figure maybe a year to get there, and then I'll start with this end here. So thank you for coming down. If you've watched this far, I'd appreciate it if you hit subscribe if you haven't already. Hit the like button. Leave me a comment, any questions you have about the layout. I also have a Facebook page. You can search for the Mondovi Line and find my Facebook page and join it there. And otherwise, thanks a lot, and we'll talk later.